Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Due to popular request, this week I am doing a little rundown of some of the things that I learned during last weekend's ultramarathon. To give a little bit of a recap, last weekend, or by the time this comes out, probably about 10 days ago, I ran a 50-kilometer ultramarathon. My first and hopefully not last ultramarathon that I've ever done. My god, it was absolutely incredible. If you haven't already watched the vlog, do go and give that a watch. I thoroughly enjoyed the entire thing. It was a trail ultramarathon, which means that it was obviously off-road, incredibly hilly, beautiful views up in the Peak District, and if you are thinking of doing one, I can thoroughly recommend it. I thought I'd put together a little bit of a list of some of the things that I learned while doing this ultramarathon, with the slight disclaimer that obviously I am not an expert, having only done one in my life. I am certainly not an expert when it comes to these kind of things. I would say I'm very much an amateur. And also, obviously these things are entirely individualistic, so what I suggest may not work for you, but hopefully if you have one coming up, you can bear some of these things in mind. The first thing that I learned is that what people say about ultramarathons really is true. It really is just an eating and drinking competition with a little bit of running thrown in. And that sounds like so off the cuff, but genuinely I think the only reason I was able to get round this, or one of the main reasons, was because I am very good at eating and drinking whilst on the run. It is something that you should practice if you have a race coming up of kind of any length where you have to eat, even gels, you know, you should be practicing that in your training sessions. While I did not specifically practice for this, having signed up relatively shortly before the race, I have obviously done a little bit of eating and drinking on the move while I run down in Dorset, like that kind of stuff for my trails. So I was relatively well practiced of eating bars and gels and drinking while on the move and all that kind of stuff, so I didn't get a stitch at all. I genuinely think that's one of the most important things when it comes to running very long distances. You just have to be able to eat on the move all the time, because otherwise you're going to bonk and it's going to hurt. So that is my first thing that I learned. It is so true what they say. My second point is that everyone feels as unprepared as you do. I wouldn't recommend doing it off no training, but generally I think when people sign up to these things, they're never going to feel as prepared as they would like to feel when they actually turn up, and I would say that I was in that category. But so many of the people that I met on the way round, especially as this is a 50-kilometer one, which is relatively short for an ultramarathon, for most people it was their first one and they felt underprepared. They felt like they would have loved, you know, another month of training or another 2 months of training, but everyone feels underprepared and everyone is just kind of there to give it their best shot. So don't feel intimidated, I guess, by everyone else there. Obviously there are going to be some really good runners and there are going to be people doing it in, you know, 5 hours. Everyone's on a different level, but don't feel intimidated by everyone around you. Everyone is there to support each other. The community is super friendly, and that is one thing that I love about trail running and running in general, but especially trail running and ultra running, is that the community is relatively small and therefore very friendly and close-knit. My third thing that I learned is that what you do in the lead up really matters, and I made the mistake of doing a relatively strenuous walk 2 days before the race, which meant that on the Saturday, the day before the race, I had DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, in my legs and my glutes, which obviously I was going to have to use the next day quite considerably. I would say, whilst it is good to shake out your legs, you know, in the lead up to the race with a couple of short runs, it's probably not a good idea to go and do something that you haven't done for a while, like climbing mountains or climbing hills. And that's obviously just the fitness side of things. What you do in terms of eating and drinking in the lead up to the race also really matters, and one thing that I am particularly careful about is making sure that I am both well hydrated and well fed in the lead up to the race, because your glycogen stores in your muscles build up. This is why we carb load, they build up over time. So it's not just about having a big bowl of pasta the night before. Actually, that's one of the worst things you can do. It's about steadily increasing the amount of carbohydrate content of your food, and as you steadily decrease the amount of training that you're doing, so that your muscles are fully fired up for the race day itself. And the same goes with hydration. You're probably going to get dehydrated on the way around a race. I know that I did. I actually ran out of water before every single aid station, so kind of every hour or so I was out of water. And while that wasn't such a problem because it wasn't a hugely long race, obviously if I hadn't been so well hydrated at the beginning of it, I may have struggled a little bit more than I did. So yeah, make sure that you have a plan in the taper week before a race like this or a long run like this. Good night's sleep, good food, good water makes a difference in the lead up to a race. My fourth thing that I learned is look up. The views will take you through the race, and if you watch my vlog, you will see that I mention the views, oh god, every 2 minutes or something. I was constantly in awe at them, and I think that's one of the things that got me through the race, was just looking up, looking at the views. And sometimes I just thought, oh my god, I need to actually stop to take this in for a second because it's stunning, and because, you know, it doesn't matter that I'm racing, I should still be able to enjoy what I'm looking at as I'm going, because otherwise you get to the end and you're kind of being like in another world for the entire thing. It's probably different for elite athletes, but I'm never going to be an elite athlete, so I think enjoying the experience and making sure to take a mental picture and a mental break as you get to the most beautiful parts of the race is really important, and that way you can kind of think back to the race itself and appreciate the views that there were. It's amazing how much the brain can help or hinder you, and I think giving your brain a break by not just thinking about your running and the pain that you're in, but actually thinking about what is around you and, you know, how lucky you are to be in a place like that is incredibly helpful, and it certainly was helpful for me as well. My fifth tip, or fifth thing that I learned, was to find your people. I spent most of the race trying to find people to run with because obviously due to COVID restrictions we were sent off in waves, which meant that I didn't actually start the race with anyone, so I was kind of by myself for a lot of the race, and I think I'd probably spent 50% of the race by myself. But the times that I felt most relaxed and most at ease, and like I was actually kind of going quite fast, were the times that I was with other people. Quite often I like to slot myself in the middle of a little group, and it doesn't, like, it's nice to talk to them, of course, but actually you don't even have to chat. Just being together and running as a group, I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do, and it's something that I personally absolutely love, and it's one thing that I learned when I was in the Azores, that actually there's no way that I could have got to the end of some of those days without the group that I was with. And it wasn't even a case of them, you know, physically supporting me or whatever, although they were obviously incredibly helpful. It was more that kind of we're running as a pack, and it kind of sweeps you to the end of the race or the run or whatever it is, and finding people during a very long race can be really helpful. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay with them. You know, what I did was I would sit with a group of people for a couple of kilometres and then move on and then go and sit with another group of people, and that works really well for me. But just, yeah, find whatever works for you and meet some nice people, because everyone is there for the same reason and they're all incredibly friendly for the most part. And yeah, I'm yet to find someone that I don't sort of have, you know, some nice conversations with on the run. So yeah, find your people. Point number 6, and I think this is important especially for your mindset, is don't try to run all of it. It's a question that I get asked a lot, is like, do you have to run the whole of an ultramarathon? And obviously it depends. There are ultras that are flat, and there are ultras that are incredibly hilly, and everything in between, of course. And for the most part, people don't run the whole thing. Obviously it's different for elite athletes, but like I said, I'm not an elite athlete. Everyone that I was running with walked the steep uphills. There were only a couple of parts where people ran the uphills. I think in the lead up, if you're thinking, oh my god, how am I going to get around 50 kilometres? I can't even run 30. The point is that you don't have to run 50 kilometres. You have to run maybe 30 kilometres or 35 kilometres, and then you can kind of walk the rest. And that is exactly what I did, and I came in a relatively good time. So I think practice your walking, practice your hill walking, practice your running, you will be able to get around it, no problem. Point 7 is to preempt injuries, and this is something that I did and something that I learned in the Azores as well, is that, like, if you know that something is rubbing a little bit, tape it up. Get a plaster, just do something about it before it becomes the point where you actually can't walk and you're hobbling around. I got my foot taped up in advance of the race because I knew that I had a bit of a niggle in my foot. So I thought, actually, if I tape this up now, then if it becomes a problem later, I can get it dealt with then, but it's less likely to become a problem if I preemptively tape. And most races, they'll have medics and physios and all that kind of stuff, so they should be able to do it for you if you don't know how to tape. I certainly don't myself, so that was really helpful for me. Same with on the way around, plan and plaster. If you have any rubbing or injuries or anything like that, just don't not stop because you want to get to the end faster, because I'm telling you now, the injuries are going to get worse as you go further along, and if you don't plaster them as soon as they become an issue, they will get considerably worse and you may or may not even get to the end. Plan ahead. So this is both in the weeks before and obviously on the day as well. In the weeks before, know your terrain, where you're going to be racing. I think one of the things that people struggled with most in the peaks was the hilliness of it, and thankfully for me, you know, I've been doing the last 6 months of running down in Dorset, where it is also incredibly hilly, and so the hills didn't really take me by surprise, although I still struggled with them obviously because there were a lot of them. Know your terrain, know where you're going to have to be racing and practice on that. I would say, like, in terms of your ligaments and your muscles, trail running is very different from road running, and you need a lot more kind of stability and strength to do trail running. It is just like a totally different style of running in terms of the kind of things that it uses. If you're not used to that, then you're gonna tire a lot quicker on a trail race than you would on a road race if you've just been prepping on the road. And that kind of should go without saying, but I think that is genuinely something that a lot of people struggled with, and was really my saving grace, is that, you know, I know how to run hills or how to walk hills because I've done a lot of them recently, and that was kind of accidental, but a very happy accident for sure. On the race day itself, planning ahead involves wrapping up before you have to, obviously taping up your injuries like I just said, and eat and drink before you are hungry or thirsty. Well, drinking, you should only really drink when you're thirsty, but in terms of eating on these sorts of things, you might not get hungry for the entire race, but you still need food. So just plan your food. I tended to eat as I was walking. I did a couple of nibbles when I was running downhill, but for the most part, I ate as I was walking uphill because it's less impact on your stomach, there's less jiggling about basically, so it's less painful for me to eat. But yeah, it just meant that I knew that by the time I got to the top I was well fed, which meant that I could just continue the race without any problems. But yeah, just plan ahead and make sure that you have sorted everything. Basically, you just need to know the course, you need to know where the windy spots are, you need to know what the terrain is going to be, you need to know the sort of gradient of the hills, you need to know where you need to push, where you need to hold back, when you need to eat, when you need to drink, all of that stuff. Just plan, 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 and that will make it so much easier when it comes to race day. My 9th point, and this is something that a lot of people asked me about as well, was like, did I listen to music? For the most part, no. I didn't listen to music until I was about 30 kilometers in or something, 35 kilometers in, and that is because A, I was having too much fun, you know, I was enjoying looking at everything, I was enjoying chatting to people, I was enjoying looking at the views and trying not to fall over, and listening to everything as well. I think especially trail marathons are really beautiful, and you don't necessarily need headphones in because the sounds of nature are pretty nice. But using music to your advantage can be really helpful on a run. So for me it was a case of plugging in when I was starting to lag a little bit, and then I've got this playlist that I had downloaded on my phone. You don't want to rely on 3G because you probably won't get any. I had it downloaded on my phone. It's a great playlist, at least I like it, and it meant that as soon as I switched it on, I was like, okay, let's go, we're doing this. We've only got 15 kilometers to go, we're gonna get to the end. And that's exactly what I did, and actually just by plugging in, you know, for 10-20 minutes at a time, I kind of just kept putting one foot in front of the other and kept myself motivated. It was just a case of having a bit of variety, so it wasn't just monotonous. You know, not that the views of the Peak District are monotonous at all, but it got to a point where I was a bit like tired, and actually having a bit of music was really useful. I don't think listening to music the whole way around is the way. I think listening to nature and looking at nature is kind of better in general, but listening to music for me was very, very helpful when I needed it. My 10th and final thing that I learned is that it really is just one foot in front of the other, and when it got to a point where it was incredibly difficult, I was really lucky because I had a friend there from about 3-4 kilometers from the end, and that meant that I was lifted up, you know, quite quickly as we were coming into the finishing straight. But as it gets difficult, you just need to think of one foot in front of the other, and that is all it is. Obviously that's easy to say now, but it's amazing how far you can go just kind of zoning out and putting one foot in front of the other, and you will get there, I promise. I hope this is helpful. I hope you are encouraged to sign up for a race at some point. I really did enjoy it. It wasn't my favourite race, but it was right up there with my favourite races, and all my favourite races are trail. They're all long, they're all very hilly, they're all beautiful, so yeah, I will definitely be doing another one at some point soon as well, and I would thoroughly recommend you sign up for one. If you have any races that you are signing up for, do comment them down below, because I'm always interested in finding new ones and new race series as well. Obviously it's difficult at the moment, but Hopefully this will encourage you to start training, and obviously ultramarathons are things that you sign up for, you know, supposedly a year in advance or something. So have a look at next year's race calendar, start planning, start prepping. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this, please do give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Go and watch last week's vlog as well of the ultramarathon itself. I hope you enjoyed that if you do give it a watch, and I will see you next time. Bye!